This is going to be different from yesterday, because instead of reading the story, I'm just going to listen to horror stories. I have a compilation here pulled up called 8 True Scary Cabin in the Woods Horror Stories by Gore Creature. This is a channel I watch a lot. It's just AI voiceover horror stories. But let's just get right into this. Also, it's like foggy and rainy, so this is a perfect night to be doing this. Let's get into the first story. Put it closer.
My name is Eldon Recker, and this happened to me back in 1998. I had just turned 30, and life was a jumble of trying to get my contracting business off the ground and managing a young family. Weekends were often my only respite, and that's why I found myself in a
Also,
cabin
I'm
in
gonna
the
try to
woods
green
near
out.
Lake George, New York. It was supposed
Just
to be a
for fun.
weekend of unwinding with a couple of friends.
And
But well, life had other
hold on.
plans. I was always the skeptic among my friends, the one who didn't buy into ghost stories or UFO sightings. So when Gabe and Tyson suggested a weekend getaway to a remote cabin, I was all in for the beers and campfires, but not for the spooky tales. The cabin was an old family property of Gabe's, something out of a postcard with its wooden beams and rustic charm. It sat at the edge of a dense forest which, during the day, looked like the perfect backdrop for an escape from reality. We arrived on a Friday afternoon, the drive up filled with laughter and a soundtrack of 90s rock. Gabe was the joker of the group, always ready with a quip or a prank. Tyson was quieter, more reserved, but his dry humor could catch you off guard.
There we go.
Me, I was just looking forward to not thinking about work for a few days. The first night was uneventful, a good kind of uneventful. We grilled steaks, downed a few beers, and swapped stories around the fire pit outside. Gabe tried to spook us with tales of the area's haunted history, but Tyson and I just laughed it off. By the time we turned in, the woods had become a black wall around the cabin, but the inside was warm and cozy. Saturday morning started with coffee, and the kind of lazy breakfast that you can only have when there's no schedule to keep. By noon, we decided to hike a trail Gabe swore was a hidden gem. It wound through the forest, up a gentle incline, and offered stunning views of the lake below. We took our time, snapping photos and ribbing each other about who had the worst hiking form. It was on the way back that things started to get weird. Tyson noticed it first, a silence that fell over the woods. No birds, no rustling leaves, just an eerie stillness. Gabe laughed it off, but I felt a prickle of unease. We quickened our pace, eager to get back to the safety of the cabin. We were about half a mile from the cabin when we found it, a campsite that looked like it had been abandoned in a hurry. There were the remnants of a fire, a tent that had been slashed open, and personal belongings strewn around. It looked fresh, maybe a day or two old at most. Maybe they got spooked by a bear or something, Gabe suggested, though there was a tremor in his voice. Doesn't look like bear work, Tyson muttered, pointing at the clean cuts on the tent fabric. We debated calling the authorities, but decided to head back to the cabin first and figure out our next move. The hike
That's a
back
terrible
was tense,
idea.
and by the time we got inside, the sun was already dipping below the treetops.
I've listened.
We spent the evening inside, locking.
I've listened to enough of these to tell you that it's going to get very unrealistic very fast. So just be warned about that. These are not like these are not like realistic horror stories like the kind I'm into, where it's like you know, some crazy person or a stalker or something. It's like monster stories and creatures and shit. So just be prepared for it to be very unrealistic, also very cringy. I think these are Reddit stories, and you'll see why I think that in a little bit. But these are probably Reddit stories. It kind of just
The doors and
it
windows
shows.
more out of an abundance of caution than any real fear. The mood had shifted, though, and even Gabe's jokes fell flat. Tyson suggested we turn in early, and no one argued. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of something moving outside. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then I heard it again, a distinct rustling, like someone walking through the underbrush. I nudged Gabe awake, and we both listened. The sound was getting closer. "Probably a deer," Gabe whispered, but his eyes were wide with fear. Then came the scratching at the door. It was a soft, almost tentative sound at first, but then it grew more insistent. Gabe grabbed a fireplace poker, and I went for the kitchen knife. We edged toward the door, hearts pounding. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. The scratching stopped. For a moment there was silence, then a low, guttural noise that didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. It was enough to make my blood run cold. We backed away from the door, moving to the window to see if we could spot anything. The moonlight cast long shadows, but there was nothing. Just the empty yard and the dense woods beyond. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A figure darting between the trees, too quick and too agile to be human. We didn't sleep much after that. By morning, the unease had settled into a kind of resigned fear. We decided to pack up and leave, but when we stepped outside, we found the tires on our truck slashed. The realization hit us like a punch to the gut. Whatever had been outside last night wasn't just passing through, it was targeting us. With no way to drive out, we decided to hike to the nearest ranger station, about 5 miles away. We packed essentials and started on our way, moving quickly, heads on a swivel. The forest, that had seemed so inviting yesterday, now felt like an oppressive maze. We were about 2 miles in when we heard it again. The rustling, the soft footsteps keeping pace with us. We tried to ignore it, tried to rationalize it, but the feeling of being watched was undeniable. Gabe was the first to crack. "All right, enough," he shouted into the trees. "Show yourself." Silence. Then, that same guttural noise, closer this time. We started running, no longer caring about the trail, just needing to get away. We burst into a clearing and stopped, gasping for breath, hearts hammering. That's when we saw it. At the edge of the clearing, half hidden in the shadows, was a creature. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, with elongated limbs and eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. Its skin was mottled like tree bark, and its mouth was a gaping maw filled with sharp, needle-like teeth. We stood frozen,
Sure, there's more
staring at
sketchy
it,
people
and for a
outside my
moment,
house
it
again.
just stared back.
I don't know why they keep
Then it
choosing my
moved,
house, but
faster than anything that size should be able to. Gabe screamed.
But
We
this is what
scattered,
I mean
running
by
in
the
different
whole
directions. I lost track of the others in my blind
turning
panic,
into
crashing
like
through
a
the underbrush,
Reddit story
not
type
caring
shit.
about the cuts and
Like this
scrapes
is,
from branches and
you
thorns.
can just tell.
I could hear the creature behind me gaining ground. I stumbled,
Some
falling
of
into
them
a
are kind
shallow
of cringy
ravine.
too.
The impact knocked the wind out of me.
I
but
don't know how
scrambled to my
cringy this
feet,
one will be, but
adrenaline
some of them are
fueling my
pretty
movements.
bad. They'll be like,
I heard a scream.
they'll give themselves
Tyson's
like a
voice, raw
superiority
with terror and
complex.
pain.
It's
I
really
wanted
weird.
to go back to help him, but survival instincts took over. I kept moving, forcing
I don't
myself to climb out of the
understand it.
ravine and keep running. I didn't stop until I reached the ranger station, breathless and on the verge of collapse. The rangers were skeptical at first, but when they saw the state I was in, they radioed for backup. We went back with a search party, but there was no sign of Gabe or Tyson. The campsite we found was even more trashed, with signs of a struggle. Bloodstains on the ground confirmed my worst fears. They searched the woods for days, but there was no trace of my friends. The official report said they were missing, presumed dead, victims of a wild animal attack. But I know what I saw, and it wasn't any animal I've ever heard of. I went back home, haunted by what happened. The nightmares followed me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, watching, waiting.
I just got a jump in
I
viewers.
sold my business, moved to a different state,
I don't know
and
why.
tried to start over. But some things you can't outrun. Every year, around the anniversary, I light a candle for Gabe and Tyson.
See, like,
I don't
he
tell
does.
people the full story anymore. They'd think I was crazy. But I know what I saw. And I know that whatever
It's
it
like-
was, it's still out there.
That part's
know
not
that-
important, you know? It's not necessary to the story. They just add it for,
One
like,
day, it might come looking
a
for me again.
superiority type thing where they're like, I'm such a great person. Look at how moral I am and shit. It's weird.
My name is Jonas Wren, and this happened to me in 2005, during what was supposed to be a peaceful getaway in the North Woods of
Or
Wisconsin.
they'll do this
I'm
fucking...
a simple guy.
It'll be like, I'm a fucking Marine type shit. They're like, I'm a Marine, and I go out into the fucking woods and go hunting. Or I'm a fucking... There was one I heard, it was like, I'm a fucking, like, top secret agent that's taxed with going out and finding these fucking, like, cryptids and shit. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about, you fucking idiot? It's like, this is unrealistic. And you're just trying to fucking act like you're some, like, super cool badass motherfucker when you're probably just some loser that lives in your mom's basement reading or writing these fucking Reddit stories. It's
Originally from
fucking
Milwaukee,
weird.
where I work as a graphic designer.
It's like, just
I needed a break
say
from the
you're a
daily
fucking
grind
dude
and
in the
endless
woods. It's that
pixels.
simple.
So I decided to rent a cabin for a week. I had been through a tough year. My mom passed away, my girlfriend left me, and my dog ran away. You know, one of those years where you feel like the universe is having a laugh at your expense. So I packed up my beat-up Ford, threw in some essentials, and drove up north, craving some solitude and a fresh perspective. The cabin was perfect, tucked away in the dense forest near Eagle River. It had that rustic charm, no Wi-Fi, a wood-burning stove, and creaky floorboards. The first few days were bliss. I spent my time hiking, fishing, and sitting by the fire with a good book. I even managed to laugh at myself, thinking, hey, at least nothing else can go wrong out here. On the fourth day, I decided to explore deeper into the woods. I found an old trail that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Overgrown and forgotten, it seemed like the perfect path for a little adventure. About an hour into my hike, I stumbled upon an abandoned campsite. The tents were torn, and old camping gear was scattered around, half buried in the dirt and leaves. It looked like whoever was there had left in a hurry. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started poking around. Among the remnants, I found a worn-out journal. The pages were weathered and stained, but the entries were still legible. The last entry caught my eye. It was dated 3 years ago and read, "Something's out there. We've heard it every night. We're leaving tomorrow. God help us." I chuckled nervously and tossed the journal back. It was probably some kids trying to spook each other. As I turned to leave, I noticed a peculiar marking on one of the trees. Deep claw marks that didn't look like they came from any animal I knew. A shiver ran through me, but I
Do
shrugged
you
it
know
off
what
and made my
a
way
bear
back to the
is?
cabin. That night I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. I locked all the doors and windows, something I hadn't bothered with before. Just as I was about to drift off, I heard it. A low, throaty noise echoing through the woods. It didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. My first thought was that it must be a bear or a coyote, but it didn't quite match up.
You didn't think it was a bear when you saw the claw marks in the tree. But you thought it might be a bear when it made a fucking groaning, guttural, fucking moaning noise. Yeah, that sounds
I
about
grabbed
right.
the old hunting rifle that came with the cabin rental, loaded it,
The
and sat by the window,
the rifle that
scanning the tree
came with
line.
the cat, that's
The
a
noise came
horrible
again,
idea. Can you
closer this
imagine, like,
time.
some fucking
I could feel my
unstable
heart pounding in
maniac
my
goes
chest.
there and
I
just,
stayed
like,
awake,
finds a
gripping the
rifle?
rifle
Well,
tightly,
shit, you just gave
but
a
whatever
fucking
it was never
psychopath a
showed
gun.
itself. By dawn, the sounds had stopped, and the woods were eerily
Or some, like,
silent.
dickhead goes there with,
convinced
like, his
myself it was
girlfriend
my
or something and they
imagination
get in a
running wild,
fight. Can you
fueled
imagine?
by the
Like,
creepy
that's
journal and the
bad.
isolation. The next day, I decided to
What the
hike back to the
fuck?
abandoned campsite.
That's not real.
Maybe I could
No,
find
no
something that
cabin comes
explained
with
the
a
noises.
rifle. Don't
When I
expect to
got
find a
there,
rifle in
I
your
found fresh
cabin.
tracks around the campsite, large and deep.
If you
They
do
definitely weren't
have a
human,
rifle in your
and they
cabin,
didn't
don't
match
touch
any
it.
animal prints I knew.
It probably shouldn't be there.
Panic started to set in, but I pushed it down, telling myself there had to be a rational explanation.
Or take it.
As I
Free
was
gun.
heading back, I noticed something odd. The trees had more of those claw marks, and some of them looked fresher. I quickened my pace, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. When I got back to the cabin, I locked up again and kept the rifle close. That night, the noises returned, louder and more frequent. They were coming from all directions, like whatever was out there was circling the cabin. I could hear branches snapping and leaves rustling. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. I stayed up all night, staring out the window, but saw nothing. The following morning, I decided enough was enough. I packed my bags, ready to leave this nightmare behind.
It took
As
you
I was
until the
loading
next
car,
morning.
I heard a rustling in the bushes. I turned and saw a figure darting between the trees. It was too quick and too big to be a deer or any other common forest animal. I froze, gripping the rifle, trying to make sense of what I saw. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the woods. It was unlike anything I had ever heard.
It's
Primal
Michael
and filled with
Jordan.
pain. I ran to the car, started the engine, and floored it. I drove
P.
like a
Diddy was
madman,
one of his
not daring
victims.
to look back. When I reached the nearest town, I went straight to the local sheriff's office. Sheriff Thompson was a no-nonsense kind of guy, in his late 50s with a gruff demeanor. I told him everything, about
Sheriff
the
Mike
noises, the claw
Chitwood.
marks, the figure, and the scream.
That's his
He
name, right?
listened patiently,
Chitwood.
but I
Mike
could see
Chitwood.
the skepticism in his eyes. "Look, son," he said, "we get
Wait,
a lot
why
of
am
city
I on
folk coming up
Yahoo?
here, and sometimes their imagination gets the better of them.
Why is
But I'll send
Yahoo
a
my main
deputy to
search
check it out."
engine? Hold on.
I thanked him and checked into a motel, too shaken to drive back to Milwaukee that night. I tried to sleep, but the images and sounds kept replaying in my mind.
This is weird.
The next morning, I decided to go back to the cabin with the deputy. Deputy Larson was a young guy, probably in his early 30s, and seemed more curious than concerned. When we arrived at the cabin,
Yeah, so Google
everything
Chrome
was
is
as I
my
left it.
default browser.
But the moment we stepped into the woods,
But I'm on
Larson's
Yahoo.
expression changed. He saw the claw marks, the tracks, and the abandoned campsite. "This isn't normal," he muttered, his hand instinctively moving to
weird.
his gun.
Whatever.
We decided to follow the tracks, which led us deeper into the forest. The further we went, the more the sense of dread grew. We reached a clearing and found something that made my blood run cold. Another campsite, this one even more recent. There were signs of a struggle, and the ground was stained with what looked like dried blood. Larson radioed for backup, and within the hour, more deputies arrived along with the sheriff. They cordoned off the area and started their investigation. As we waited, Larson and I stood guard, our eyes scanning the tree line. That's when we heard it again. The scream, closer this time. Everyone froze, weapons drawn. The scream was followed by a series of guttural noises getting nearer. The deputies formed a perimeter, flashlights cutting through the dim light of the forest. I could feel my pulse in my ears, every muscle tensed. Then, from the darkness, it emerged. At first, it was just a shape, a massive silhouette moving between the trees. As it stepped into the light, we saw it clearly. A hulking figure, covered in matted fur, with eyes that gleamed in the darkness. It was unlike anything any of us had seen, a grotesque mix of man and beast. It let out a roar and charged at us. The deputies opened fire, but the creature was fast, zigzagging through the trees. It swiped at one of the deputies, sending him flying into a tree with a sickening thud. I raised the rifle and fired, hitting it in the shoulder. It howled in pain but kept coming. We retreated, firing as we went, trying to make it back to the vehicles. The creature was relentless, tearing through the forest, its
6'5"
eyes fixed
Creedmoor.
on us. Just when it seemed like we were
That's the
done for,
solution
it stopped
that I
abruptly,
offer
letting
you.
out a final roar. before disappearing into the woods. We didn't wait to see if it would return. We piled into the vehicles and sped back to town. The deputy who was attacked was badly injured, but alive. The sheriff ordered everyone to stay quiet about what happened,
No, he
fearing a
didn't.
panic.
No, he didn't.
In the days that followed, the area around the cabin was closed off,
Nah.
and an official report was filed
They would
citing a
have
bear
said,
attack.
don't go into the woods.
But I knew better.
Don't
Whatever
fucking,
that
yeah.
thing was, it wasn't a bear. I returned to Milwaukee, trying to put the experience behind me, but the memories lingered. Months later, I got a call from Larson. He had left the sheriff's department and was investigating the incident on his own.
No,
He
he
had found
wasn't.
similar reports from other parts of the country, sightings of a creature that matched the
People
description
don't
of
do
what we
that.
saw. He asked if I wanted to join him in finding out more, but I declined. I had seen
That's
enough.
not a real thing.
To this
People
day,
don't
I
just,
can
like,
still hear the screams and see those
people don't just, like, drop everything and go out to investigate some fucking event that happened, some weird event that happened in their past. That's not a thing. People don't just, like, quit their fucking job and go and just spend all their time investigating some stupid fucking paranormal shit. Because that's fucking stupid. No one does that. That's not real.
gleaming eyes in my nightmares. I avoid the woods now, sticking to the city where the dangers are more familiar. But every so
What,
often
the
I wonder if it's
crackheads
still
with
out there,
knives?
lurking in the shadows, waiting.
Because those guys are pretty fucking dangerous. Fucking crackheads with knives.
My name is Eamon Bruker, and this story happened to me in 2015. I was a simple guy, working as an
Just
electrician
a
in
chill
Pittsburgh.
guy.
My job
working
wasn't
as an
anything glamorous, but
electrician.
it paid the bills, and it was honest work. I lived in a small apartment, had a cat named Moxie, and enjoyed my quiet, predictable life. I wasn't the kind of person to seek out thrills or adventure.
By the way, I'm
I liked
still
my
sick,
routine,
but I
my
just
comfort
decided
zone.
that I don't care
But
anymore,
then,
so I'm gonna
something
smoke.
happened that turned my world upside down and left me questioning everything I knew. It started with a trip to the Allegheny National Forest. My buddies, Keith and Lance, convinced me to join them on a weekend getaway to a cabin in the woods. They said we all needed a break, some time to unplug and enjoy nature. I wasn't too keen on the idea, but they kept nagging until I caved in. Besides,
I
it
feel
had been a
like...
while since I spent some quality time with them.
Hold on.
The cabin was old but sturdy, nestled deep in the woods, far away from civilization. It had a rustic charm, with its wooden beams and stone fireplace.
I have the
There was no
capacity
cell service,
to do
which was
something
both a blessing and a
cool. Oh, wait, fuck me. Oh, fucking... What the fuck? Hold on.
we were cut off from the world. The first day was uneventful. We hiked, fished, and sat around the campfire, swapping stories and drinking beer. Keith told us about his latest dating disaster, and Lance shared his plans for renovating his house. It was good to be out there, away from the city, just three guys enjoying the great outdoors. That night, though, things took a turn. We were sitting around the campfire, the flames crackling and popping, casting dancing shadows on the trees. Keith was in the middle of a story about his childhood when we heard a noise. It was faint at first, a rustling in the bushes. We paused, looking around, but didn't see anything. Probably just a raccoon, Keith said, waving it off. But the noise persisted, growing louder, more insistent. It was like something was moving through the underbrush, getting closer. Lance grabbed a flashlight
Probably
and
like
shone
a
it into the
bear.
woods. The beam of light cut through the
Or
darkness,
me.
revealing nothing but trees
I
and
don't know.
shadows. Maybe it's a
Crackhead
deer,
with a knife.
he suggested, though he didn't sound convinced.
Nah, crackhead with a
We
knife.
tried to ignore it, but the sound
Coming to
continued,
steal your beans and
circling
slit your
around us.
throat.
It was unnerving, like we were being watched. Keith joked about Bigfoot,
I don't know if I've told
but I
that
could see
story
the
before.
tension in his eyes. We
Real
decided to
quick.
call it a night and headed.
So one time, me and my boy, Luke, I don't know if you guys remember Luke, but, we were downtown, and then, I was like on my way back home, right? I was walking to the bus stop after me and Luke hung out. And when I was at the bus stop, this homeless guy came up to me and he was like, "Yo, can I get $1?" And I was like, "Yeah, what for?" Because I don't, want to give it to him if he's just going to be like, "I'm going to go spend it on crack." Because it's like, I could just be spending that money on crack for myself. Anyway, that's a joke, by the way. So anyway, he was like, "I want to go down to the Walgreens right there." I was like, "All right, bet. What you gonna get?" I was like, I'll just buy it for you." And he was like, "I'm trying to give me some beans." So naturally, I gave him the money so he could go get his beans. 'Cause no, I'm not gonna stop a man from getting his beans. And he's like walking off. And as he's walking away, he turns around and he's like, "Thanks, Beans, man." So, anyway, fast forward like a couple weeks later, and I'm at that same bus stop waiting for the bus to go home. This was probably after work, I think. And this same guy, comes up to me. He's like, "Yo, Beans, man, what's up?" And he pulls out a knife. I thought he was gonna stab me. He's like, "You want to see my knife?" He started fucking homeless guy on like meth or something is just showing me his knife after I gave him like $15 for beans. And I don't really know what else like to do, so I'm just looking at his knife. I don't want him to stab me, obviously, but I never saw him after that. And I don't know if that was a dream or not, because it was really weird. And I was on acid for like a good 3 months at the time. So I was like fucked. So I could have just hallucinated the whole thing. But like I was so gone that I don't even know. And that's still one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had. So like if Beans Man, you're the guy that calls me Beans Man, is out there, shout out to you. Come back to the bus stop. I got some more money
Get into
for
the
you.
cabin, locking the door behind us. I didn't sleep well. The sounds outside seemed to grow louder, more distinct. It wasn't just rustling anymore. It was footsteps, deliberate and
Austin's
heavy.
great.
I lay in bed, staring at
There
the
was that
ceiling,
guy.
every creak
I
of
don't
the
know if
cabin
you
setting
remember
my
that
nerves
guy.
on edge.
Anyone that lives
Around midnight,
here
I heard something
might
that made
remember
my
him.
blood run cold.
There was that guy
A
that used to
scratching
stand
sound,
on the
like
corner.
claws on wood, right outside my window.
I think it was.
I sat up, heart pounding, and
I think it was on the corner of 6th.
The scratching
honestly.
continued, slow
But he
and
was standing on the
methodical.
corner and
I
just
wanted to look, to see what was
in
out
like
there,
a
but
bikini
fear kept me rooted in place.
and asked
I
for
grabbed
money.
my phone, but of course there was no signal. I thought
I
about
don't know
waking
if you
Keith
guys
and
remember
Lance,
that guy,
but
but
what could they do?
legend.
The
Apparently
scratching
he
eventually
stabbed
stopped,
someone after
and I
that.
lay
I don't
there,
remember the whole
wide-eyed
thing,
and
but like
alert,
he
until
stabbed
the first
someone
light
and
of
then
dawn
just
crept
disappeared.
through the window.
Or no, I think
When
he
I
killed his
finally mustered
girlfriend.
the
That's
courage
really
to check
bad.
outside,
Anyway.
there was nothing there. Just a few scratch marks on the wooden frame.
But he'd like disappeared.
Did you
No one
guys
knows
hear
if he got
anything last
arrested
night?
or just like
I
left
asked over
town.
breakfast. Keith and Lance shook their heads, looking as tired as I felt.
Shout out that
Probably
guy as
just
well.
an animal, Lance said, though he didn't sound convinced. We spent the day exploring the forest.
Or that guy
But I
that used to
couldn't shake the
paint
feeling that we were
downtown.
being
He would
followed.
just sit there
I
in
kept
his
seeing
underwear
glimpses of
and a
movement
hoodie
out of the corner of my
and
eye,
paint
shadows flitting between
just on the
trees.
corner. And he would
Keith
like
and Lance
show
teased me
people his
about being
pictures,
paranoid,
try to sell them.
but I
But they
could
were really
tell
bad.
they were on edge too.
I think he was like,
That night,
well,
we made sure to
I don't
lock
like
all the
abstract
windows
art.
and
But what
doors
he would
before
do
going
is
to
he would
bed.
just like hit the
I lay there,
canvas
listening
with
to the
paint,
sounds
I
of the
think.
forest. Every
If
rustle
I'm
and creak
remembering it right.
magnified in
He
the
would just hit
silence.
the canvas with the paint.
Around midnight, the scratching started again, this time on the back door. I sat up, my heart racing, and listened.
I mean, you
The
guys might
scratching was
like it.
slow and
If you
deliberate,
guys want to buy
like whatever
some
was out there knew
of his
we'd be
art, go
inside.
for it. I don't know where he's
I
at,
couldn't
though.
take it anymore. I grabbed a flashlight and headed to the living room, where Keith and Lance were already up, looking just as scared as I felt. Did you hear that?
So, yeah,
Keith
shout out
whispered.
Austin. This
I
place is
nodded,
fucking
and we
weird.
stood there staring at the door, listening to the scratching. We need to see what it is, Lance said, his voice shaking. "We can't just sit here and do nothing." Reluctantly, we opened the
Or that
door,
I met a
flashlight
guy
in
on the
hand,
bus.
and stepped outside.
I think he was like
The
a
night was
paranoid
pitch black.
schizophrenic or
The
something.
only
But
sound, the
I met a
chirping
guy
of
on the
crickets.
bus, and he was
I
like,
shone the flashlight around. There was
I
nothing
used to
there,
be in the
just the
FBI
empty
and shit,
forest.
and I don't know if
Maybe
that
it was
was
just
true
an
or
animal,
not, but like he
Keith said,
was fucking
though he didn't sound convinced.
like convinced that
We
people
headed
were
back
after
inside,
him for some
locking the
reason.
door behind us.
And he had a
But the scratching
sign that
continued,
said something
this
about like
time on the
the New
walls,
World
the
Order or
windows,
something. It was
the roof.
really goofy.
It was like whatever was out there
But
was
he was
trying to
like
get in.
talking. He was like
We sat in
super
the living room,
philosophical.
huddled
That
together,
was a
too scared to
chill
sleep,
guy. He
listening
was
to the
smart as
sounds of the
fuck,
night.
but he was
The
really
next morning,
paranoid.
we decided to cut our trip short.
Like he was
We packed our
not
bags
all
and
there.
headed out, eager to leave the cabin and whatever was out there behind. But as we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched.
I never saw that
A
guy
few
again
days
either.
later, back in Pittsburgh, I started noticing strange things. I'd come home to find my apartment door unlocked,
Maybe I make homeless
even though I
people
was sure I had
disappear.
locked it.
My
My belongings
existence,
would be moved, things missing. I started
my
getting anonymous
presence
phone
around
calls,
them is
the
like
sound of breathing on the other end.
it's a negative
I was
force,
being stalked, but by what,
and they
I
just
didn't know.
cease to exist.
One night, I came home to find my cat, Moxie, missing. I searched the
Like God,
apartment,
that
calling her name,
conversation was so
but she was
fucking
gone.
awful. Like why
There was
am
no
I
sign
here?
of a struggle,
And they
no
just stopped
indication of how she had
existing.
gotten out. I was devastated and
That would be
terrified.
sad.
Whatever had been at the cabin
I'm really
had
high, by
followed
the
me
way.
home.
I don't know if you could
I
tell.
started carrying
I
a
think
knife
I'm
with me,
reading out.
locking all my doors and windows, but it didn't help. The scratching started again, this time on my apartment door. I called the police, but they found nothing. No prints, no evidence of anyone trying to break in. It was like I was being haunted by a ghost. Then one night, it all came to a head. I was lying in bed trying to sleep
Why did my
when I heard the
car just
scratching
move?
again. This time,
Am I
it was
tapping my
inside the
foot so
apartment,
hard that it's
right
moving the
outside my
car?
bedroom door. I grabbed the knife and slowly opened the door, my heart pounding
I
in my
am.
chest.
What the fuck?
There, standing in the hallway, was a figure. It was tall and gaunt,
Shit.
its skin pale and stretched tight over its bones.
No.
Its eyes were black pits,
No.
empty and soulless. It had long
See,
claw-like fingers,
That's what.
which it was using to scratch the walls.
That's what's creepy to
froze,
me.
the knife
That
trembling
sounds
in my
like the
hand.
rake, by the way.
The figure turned
That's
to look
what's
at me,
creepy
its
to
eyes
me
boring
is
into mine.
like
Then it lunged, moving faster than I could
creatures.
react. I slashed out with the
They're always
knife, but it
described
passed
with
through the
like
figure like it was made of smoke. I ran, bolting out of the apartment and into the street. I didn't stop running until I reached Keith's place.
sorry,
I
I'm
banged
really
on the
high.
door,
They're
yelling for
always
him to let me
described
in.
with like
When he opened the door,
like
I collapsed,
super
sobbing
tight
and shaking.
skin,
I told
like
Keith
stretched
everything
over their
about the
bones.
cabin,
Like
the
that's creepy
scratching,
as
the
fuck.
figure. He looked at me like I was crazy, but he let me stay the night.
I don't
The
like
next
it.
day, we went back to my apartment, but there was no sign of the figure. The scratch marks were gone and Moxie was still missing. I moved in with Keith for a while, too scared to go back to my apartment. I started seeing a therapist, trying to make sense of what had happened. But the figure, the scratching, it all stayed with me, haunting my dreams.
It's almost
A few months
midnight.
later, I got a call from the
I'm gonna
police.
I'm
They
gonna I'm gonna
had found
try to
Moxie's
go.
collar in the woods near the cabin. They never found her, or any
I'm gonna
trace of the
finish this
figure.
story, end the
It was
stream,
like it had never
and
existed.
then in a little bit I'm gonna
I
start
don't
a
know
new
what
one.
happened to me out there in the woods. Maybe it
That'll
was just my
go,
mind playing tricks
and
on
it'll
me,
hopefully
a
go at
product of
like
stress
3
and
a.m.,
paranoia. Or maybe
which
there really was
is like
something out
scary
there,
time.
something that followed
So
me home. All I know is that
that's
my
what I'll
life
do.
was never the same after that trip. I quit my job, moved to a different city, and tried to start over. But the memories, the fear, it all stayed with me. A constant reminder of the horrors I faced in that cabin in the woods.
I'll do a few more stories, I guess, like 2 more. Or not 2 more. This
And fear.
shit, my bad.
We kept a fast pace, driven by desperates. Sage was in her element, pointing out different plants and animal tracks,
Hold
while
on.
Holden and I lagged behind, chatting about work and life. It felt good to be out there, away from everything. It was around noon when we found the first sign that something was off. Holden was the one who spotted. I nodded, my mind made up. At first light, we're getting out of here, and more open. Find out what's out there. Holden, flashlight. Itself was watching, saying
Hold
we
on.
needed to protect ourselves. We gathered what supplies we could. Flashlights,
How does this
knives,
timing work?
anything that
Oh,
could be
okay.
used as a weapon, and set out into the woods. The forest was eerily quiet. The usual sounds of birds and a tree, its bark
Hold
stripped
on.
away in places, leaving deep gashes that looked
Dude,
all
I'm pissed now. I hate this fucking computer, man. Like, I don't get why it can't just stop being so fucking sensitive to every single fucking time I touch it. Like, not every single fucking little tiny movement on the fucking, like, touchpad has to be a fucking click. It's so fucking annoying.
My name is Axel Boone, and this happened to me in 2003.
Alright, last story.
I was fresh out of college, trying to find my footing in the real world, juggling 2 part-time jobs to pay off my student loans. I had a knack for carpentry, thanks to summers spent working with my uncle, so I took on odd jobs here and there. Despite the hustle, I made time for a few close friends, and we had a tradition
Drink
of going up
beer,
to my family's
by
cabin
the
in
way.
the Adirondacks for a long weekend
And
every summer.
vodka. It's
The cabin,
really good for
built by
you.
my grandfather,
I've been
had been a retreat
drinking
for the Boones for
hella
generations.
vodka recently
It
because I'm
wasn't
sick.
luxurious, but it was
So I'm
sturdy,
just like trying to
with a
burn
certain
my
charm
throat
only
so it
old,
stops being
weathered wood can
sore.
offer.
That
It
shit
sat on the edge
works,
of a
by the
dense
way, but
forest,
like,
miles away
I've
from the
been
nearest
feeling
neighbor.
so
Perfect
good
for fishing,
because, like, I'm just
hiking,
drunk
and
as
unwinding
shit.
from
So,
city
like, I
life.
don't feel sick. I just feel
That year,
fucked up.
I invited my friends from college,
It's
Clay
great.
and Trevor, and
Pro
my cousin
tip:
Lars.
get
We
drunk when
packed
you're
up my
sick.
old Chevy with enough supplies to last us a week. Beer, fishing gear, and just enough food to keep our mothers from worrying. The drive up was uneventful, filled with banter and classic rock on the radio. When we arrived, everything seemed normal. We unloaded the car and settled in.
That
first
follows
evening
the
was all
same
about
format as the
unwinding, grilling some
first or
burgers and
second
catching
story. I
up.
don't remember.
The air was crisp, and the smell of pine trees was comforting. I made a joke about the cabin being our little slice of heaven,
Yo!
and everyone laughed.
No, yeah, this is following the exact same structure. What the fuck? They took the same template, I think. Because the last one was fucking... Or the other one was like, it was me and my 3 friends, and we drove up, and we were talking and listening to 90s rock, and then it was like, someone made a joke, and everyone laughed. Or it was talking about how, like, someone was the jokester and they were always joking around and shit. Like, what the fuck? Unoriginal.
The next
Boo.
day, we went fishing at the nearby lake. We didn't catch much, but it was fun just being out on the water, talking about our plans and dreams. Clay was thinking about law school.
Who are
Trevor
the
was
2
working on a
people
tech
that have been in
startup,
my fucking
and Lars
stream
was
for this
contemplating a
long?
move to California.
How do you not...
We
I'm
headed
sorry,
back
this
to
is
the
about to
cabin
be
as the
really
sun
mean.
began
How
to
do you
dip,
not have
ready
anything
for
better
another
to do
night
than
of
watch a
grilling and stories.
fucking
As
idiot
the evening wore on,
high in his
we heard
car
rustling
listening
in
to
the
shitty
woods.
horror stories off
Nothing
Reddit?
unusual, probably just deer or raccoons, but it added a bit of an edge to our campfire tales. We spun yarns about legendary creatures and local
It's
ghost stories,
fucking like 12
trying to
o'clock at
outdo each
night.
other.
Go to sleep.
It was all in good fun
Jesus
until we heard a
Christ.
loud crash from inside the cabin. We rushed
Fucking
in,
3 people.
armed with
Why?
nothing but a flashlight and a couple of beer bottles. The kitchen window was shattered, glass scattered across the floor. My first thought was a bear, but there were no signs of one outside. We cleaned up the mess, securing the window with a piece of plywood and some nails from the shed. We decided to stay up a bit longer, keeping watch. But eventually, exhaustion won, and we all crashed in the living room. I woke up to Lars shaking me, a look of pure panic on his face. Trevor was missing. His sleeping bag was empty. His shoes gone. We called out for him, searched the cabin and the immediate surroundings, but he was nowhere to be found. The forest seemed to swallow our voices, giving nothing back. Clay suggested we drive to the nearest ranger station, about 15 miles away, but the truck wouldn't start. I checked under the hood, and found the spark plugs ripped out. Who would do that? It didn't make any sense. We decided to stick together and search the forest on foot. The sun was climbing, casting long shadows through the trees. We moved methodically, calling out for Trevor, but there was no sign of him. The further we went, the more
I'm
the
so
forest
high.
seemed to close in on us, the undergrowth thick and unyielding. Around midday, we found a set of tracks, human footprints mingled with something
My
else.
heart's beating a little
Something large.
fast. I
The
should
prints led
probably
deeper into
chill
the
out on the
forest,
smoking.
away from the lake and the cabin.
It's
We
raising
followed,
my blood
a sense of
pressure.
dread settling over us like a heavy fog. The tracks led us to a clearing where we found a makeshift campsite, the remnants of a fire, some discarded food wrappers, and Trevor's watch
Can
lying
you
in the
tell
dirt.
I'm high?
There were no signs of a struggle, but the air was thick with an unsettling silence. We called
This
out
is
again,
great.
our voices sounding small and insignificant in the vastness of the forest.
I'm gonna, when
As
I'm
we stood
finished
there,
with this
trying to make
stream,
sense
I'm
of it
gonna
all,
go
we
inside
heard a
and
low
I'm gonna
rustling
watch
from the
funny
trees.
shit and laugh.
Something was watching us.
Uh,
I felt it
it's
before I
gonna be
saw it,
great.
an
I'm
oppressive
fucking
presence,
cooked.
like a weight on my
Yeah,
chest.
dude.
Then, from the
Let's
shadows,
go.
it emerged. The creature was unlike anything I had ever seen.
Tight
It stood on
skin?
2 legs, hunched and muscular, with coarse, matted fur covering its
No.
body.
Damn.
Its face was a grotesque blend of human and animal features, eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. It made no sound, just stared at us, its gaze piercing and unyielding. Clay, always the impulsive one, threw a rock at it. The creature didn't flinch.
Shoot
Instead,
it.
it stepped forward, and we realized how massive it was,
Shoot it.
towering over us, exuding a primal, terrifying power. We did the only thing we could.
Shoot
We
it.
ran. We
No.
bolted through the forest, branches tearing at our clothes,
No.
lungs burning with exertion. I didn't look back, too scared of what I might see. We burst
So
out of
here's
the
the
forest
thing,
into the
right?
cabin.
If I tried to run from any situation like this, I would not get away. Like my lungs would give out before I could get away. They would fucking collapse. Like I would not make it. My lungs are too fucked for that. There's like permanent scarring and shit. Like it's bad. That
Our
would
hearts
not
pounding and
happen.
slammed the door shut behind us.
I
We
would
spent
just
the
have
night
to shoot it
barricading the doors and windows,
and
anything to
hope
keep
it
that thing
works.
out. None of us slept. Every noise outside
Because
made us
there's no
jump.
running for
Every
me.
creak of the cabin settling sent shivers down our spines. The hours crawled by, each minute feeling like an eternity. At dawn, we cautiously ventured outside. The truck was still dead, but we had to get help. We decided to hike to the ranger station, sticking to the main trail, hoping to avoid another encounter with the creature. The hike was grueling, every step filled with paranoia and fear. We kept a fast pace, driven by desperation. About halfway there, we found Trevor. Or rather, what was left of him. His body was torn apart, scattered
Trevor
across the forest floor
died.
in a gruesome display. The sight was horrifying, the reality of it almost too much to bear.
Sounds
We didn't
like
have time to
Trevor should have
grieve. We
shot
had to
it.
keep moving. We finally reached the ranger station, exhausted and traumatized. The rangers listened to our story with a mix of disbelief and concern, but when they saw the state we were in, they knew something terrible had happened. They organized a search party, but I knew it was too late for Trevor. The aftermath was a blur of police reports, interviews, and media coverage. The official story was that Trevor had been attacked by a bear, but we knew the truth. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't a bear. It was something far more sinister, something that defied explanation. I never went back to the cabin. None of us did. The memories were too painful, the fear too real. Clay moved to the West Coast. Lars relocated to Europe, and I found myself drifting, trying to outrun the nightmares that haunted me. Years passed, but the events of that summer never left me. They lingered in the back of my mind, a constant reminder of the unknown horrors that lurk just beyond the edge of civilization. I learned to live with it, but the scars remained. I still wonder about that creature. Where did it come from? What was it? I suppose I'll never know. But one thing is certain. I'll never forget the terror we faced in those woods, and the friend we lost to the darkness. In the end, I found some semblance of peace, but the experience changed me.
And that's the end of that story and the end of this stream. If you enjoyed, I don't know why. That's kind of scary. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in like a couple hours, because I'm gonna do this again. Bye. Where's the end button? There it is. Bye.